love the conversations about chat GBT, and so I want to connect with all of that sometime soon.
Well, it really is. It's a wonderful tool to be using. It's interesting. I've got two subjects for today's call. One was provided by Chris Gloss, and the other by Tim White, and neither one of them are on the call yet. So I wanted to wait until one of them arrives to get into the meat of this. So yeah, ChatGPT. I'll just tell you that. I find it very useful if you approach it this way. So if you give it a bunch of bulleted points, so key points you want to make, key insights you want to share, etc., um, and then ask it to craft paragraphs based on that, it seems to do a very good job. But if you say, here's a whole lot of completed text, now, please extract from this whatever the key insights may be. It ends up giving you very different things. So, in fact, I'm going to go ahead and slide this into the screen while we're waiting for the guys to arrive. So I said, all right, well, I'm trying to basically take the book that I wrote on sales and just turn it into a book on general change management, because we all know that tension management is tension management. We're just changing the context of it. So I thought that's it. So I said, okay, fine. Well, here's the first chunk. Please tell me from the first chunk what the key insights were. So this is directly from ChatGPT, and I'll just read one of these so you can kind of get the flavor. So the fossil record holds fascinating insights into the history of life on Earth. It reveals that a staggering 99% of all species that have ever existed are now extinct. This highlights the two main causes of extinction: cataclysmic events and dysfunction within a species. By examining the fossil record, we can draw parallels to our own lives and understand the impact of these causes on our success. Now, I was thinking it might be nice to use some of these key insights as like a summary of the chapter, or, I think it's a pretty interesting, just kind of notes, a sort of guide to give people. And so it gave me 5 of them, and I thought, oh, this is fantastic. If it'll just do all of this for the entire chapter, how great would this be? And so then I gave it the second section of it, and this is what it said. Humans as a species share the primary directive to survive, just like the countless species that have preceded us. Everything is now like one sentence instead of having some, some copy, some real richness to it. And try as I might to get it to now take these 6 and flesh it out similar to the first 5 that you see, it won't do it. It just seems like it can't do it. So am I the only one that
I don't know. What did you do differently the second time?
absolutely nothing, because I said, gave them the exact same prompt, and all I did was said, here is the copy. And I cut and pasted the
Wow.
copy. And then I went on to the third section, and suddenly I'm getting 2 sentences for the third section of it, and maybe a little bit more. So that's kind of in between. And then when I get to the 4th section, I'm back to the single line kind of thing. And so the prompt never changes in all of it. I guess this was 4 sections, but you guys can kind of see, would you not find that frustrating if it's giving you, 2, 3, 4 different
Well, yeah, it makes you think there really is a little person behind there changing their mind.
yeah, they're changing their mind. And so I'm going like, all right, now, yeah, at a certain point you go, all right, is this saving me time, or is this just scrambling things up? Because all I want to do, I like the copy that I've already written. I just want to go in and make it more about personal change management than about sales. And yeah, you would think that would be easy enough, but that is not proven to be the case.
Yeah,
So,
see at that learnprompting.org that I put in the site there,
yep.
it'll tell you that the research shows the answer isn't the thing. Like it creates kind of a theme, a label, and you're to kind of refeed that back. And so like one of the shortcuts, or whatever you want to call them, they call it few shot standard prompts, and you give it a task, example, and a prompt, but the answer you have to refeed it in a way that it's taking that task description,
Yep.
examples, and prompt to the next level. So you're
Yep.
always kind of retraining it, and the more you train it, then it gets it. And that way it kind of acts like almost like humans in terms of how we develop habits where it becomes automatic. But at
That's
first
right.
it's not
That's
going to
right.
get it.
Right. And so now it becomes this more of a practical kind of thing. If I was writing something from scratch, well, I could see how I would just give it these little bullets. So assume that I just started with this bulleted list and say, now flesh this out into a readable chapter. I think it would find an easier time doing that than trying to extract things from the work if I'm trying to edit it. So I guess I'm babbling, but the big question mark I have is it more time efficient to simply go through the copy I already have and manually change the examples I give and references I make from sales to something more generic? And
Mm.
I'm thinking the answer is yeah. So, and particularly now imagine, let's advance into ChangeWorks, and I'm talking about the 5 levels of tension. The 5 levels of tension, we'd have nothing more than an example from sales to say this is what stress looks like, sounds like, whatever. I mean, I don't think that it's I don't know. I'll keep you in the loop on the whole thing, but right now I'm not all that happy with Chat GPT just going through and neutralizing references contained in a chapter. You know, mind you, if it did everything the same way it did these first 5, how many of you would go like, that's great?
Right, right.
But I can't get it to do this again. So anyway, there you are. That's my little lesson into what's been going on with ChatGPT. All right, so let's see. Chris has joined us, so let me go ahead and label the call, and let's get into something that Chris uh, brought to our attention. So, hi everybody. This is T. Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we're going to start a new topic. And this topic is really about examining some models that many of you have been sending over to me in recent weeks. And so I thought, let's kind of look at each one of these models and see what we can do. Now, Chris, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I do believe you sent me, I think it's called something chemistry.
Business chemistry from Deloitte.
From Deloitte. Okay, business chemistry from Deloitte. And by the way, you guys can certainly do a search for it, but I think I can just chat this over to everybody. So just one second.
I'm gonna
Where's
try
my
as
pretty
well.
picture? Yeah.
That's
Oh,
the
there you
with
go.
the link. Yeah.
There's the link for it. And I'm going to send you the pretty picture that I got here as well. It's a nice little infographic that we're going to be taking a closer look at. We're going to, let's just skip this. This is something Tim sent over about diversity, equity, and inclusion, a little model about where people are on the spectrum. So here it is. Now let's see if I can zoom in on this just a little bit more than I have. But this is one of the main diagrams in this business chemistry kind of thing. Now, Chris, go ahead and set up why you give a hoot about business chemistry.
Well, a client that I'm working with, they want to abandon using the disk profile, and they came across this content and information, I believe, at ATD, actually. And so they're looking to adopt this model. I'm completely unfamiliar with it, didn't know it existed. That's why I chatted over to you.
Yeah, and I think this whole idea about business chemistry as a model was proposed some time ago. I don't see any copyright date on the things we're looking at right now, but I do believe it's been around for a good long while. So, as always, what we want to do is kind of look at their model as they've presented it and then see if it overlays on the change grid. If so, how does it what do we add to it? What does it add to what we understand, and kind of work our way from there? And so let's just kind of look at this diagram for just a second. First of all, I think the way they're showing things like pioneer, driver, integrator, guardian, this is very much what a a periodic table of elements would look like. There's a symbol for the element, and then usually what the element actually is named underneath it. So this is their little chemistry sort of thing. And I also think they're using the word chemistry because they're going to talk about how things blend together and whether you get, harmony in the reaction or whether you get something that explodes on the lab table. So really, really interesting. But basically, they say there are these four main elements. We'll use them for chemistry. There's a driver element. And we'll come back to what they're describing for it is, but there's a driver element, a guardian element, an integrator element, and a pioneer element. So far, I'm seeing and feeling that there is some sort of quadrant-based thing going on here, even though they're showing it more as a circumplex kind of thing. We're showing it more as things change as we work our way around the circle. Now, for each of those, they give some descriptions. So under driver, they say, well, it's quantitative and logical. Now, quantitative and logical, if we just stop right there, driver, as we use those terms, I don't think that I would put front and center quantitative and logical associated with the driver, right? And you guys all, chime in as we're doing this. So
Yes.
see where we're at, yeah.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, and now if I look a little bit deeper, they say apparently there's a couple of variations of drivers or a couple of different ways the driver expresses itself, and that is this orange area. And by the way, what they're doing is they're coming along in the color spectrum. So they're saying the driver's epicenter might be right here, but there is a commander type that is more of the orange, and there is a scientist type, which is getting us more into the purples, if you see that. And so the commander type tends to be more focused and competitive, and the scientist type tends to be more experimental and deeply curious. But all of that, in their way of looking at things, falls into the category of driver. So from the get-go, do you guys say part of that resonates very easily and part of it I got a question mark about?
Yeah, part of it I have a question mark about. I would say, what I want to do intuitively is just kind of tip it to the right a little bit to correspond with the change grid.
Yep, and that's what we're going to end up doing in just a second. Great observation, that fast. Wait, this isn't the strict arrangement like we have it. This needs to be rotated to some degree in order for it to overlay. We got to figure out now, does it need to be flipped as well, or is the arrangement okay? It just needs to be rotated. So sometimes we just rotate something. Sometimes we have to do a mirror image flip to make it work. And we might need to flip it horizontally. We might need to flip it vertically. But we'll see what we need to do in this one to get the model to overlay. Now,
may I ask a quick question?
Please do.
To Chris, like why do they want to abandon this, and what are they looking for from this that this does not provide them? Do you know?
Yeah, it's kind of a feel with some new leadership in place. They feel like DISC is outdated and no longer fits the needs for their business case. So when they were presented this, it was just a feel, and I'm sure there was some data analytics that they were tying their decision to, but it was just that DISC wasn't no longer serving them, and it just looking for something new.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you bring that up and that you share that, Chris, because if you go to Deloitte's homepage, which is the link that Chris chatted over to everybody, you can see that some of the things they say you can explore at a glance right here. They're showing you the four. They're going, find your working style. So I think they're being a lot more focused on this idea about how people get their work done, approach their work, as opposed to DISC, which is looking more at someone's overall personality and then applying it to umpteen different situations. But DISC, I think, is going to be more general. And they're saying like, no, we're isolating this a little bit more tightly around work style. Now let's see, David's on the call. David's one of our resident experts on all things DISC. So is what I said there true, David, that DISC really is looking more at general personality sorts of things and then applying it to various, situations inside of a business setting. So Yeah, okay, well, you're unmuted at the moment, so feel free to unmute if you'd like. All right, they got a lot of interesting tools here that we can all kind of look at if we want, but that seems to be the thing that pulls my attention to the thought that they are focusing on something specific about work style. And obviously you can scroll through this and you get to that diagram I'm showing you larger on the screen right now. And then they've got a lot of, fun little videos that they're trying to, help you kind of do. So obviously this is more of a sales sort of page. It's all good stuff, no mistake about it. We just have to do our normal thing, and we will, we tend to initially grant that all models are brilliant until we determine otherwise. And so in the world of the circle of brilliance, the merging of brilliance, and obviously it's from Deloitte, so we're going to say it's got some substance behind it, but not that they can't do anything wrong, but whatever. So we're going to say this is probably brilliant. Let's see if that holds true as we work our way through it. Now, if we drop down for just a second to the Guardian is where these blue hues are all happening. You can see how they've got these concentric circles that are radiating further and further away to kind of show where overlap would occur. So I'm sure if we did a deeper dive into it, they're going to show us that we have some sort of a percentage of each of these contributing factors, and that's going to pinpoint us somewhere else on this whole thing. So that's all fine. I'd love to see what an actual report looks like. What does the respondent actually receive to kind of figure out how that might overlay. But going into it, the model here says there's also this Guardian type, which is a little clockwise from where the driver is, in fact, 90 degrees clockwise from where we were. The Guardian is methodical, reserved, detail-oriented, practical, structured, and loyal. Notice they don't subdivide that. They just say, no, Guardian's down here, and don't worry about purple, don't worry about whatever this teal color happens to be, it's all good. Now, they do say that in between, there are some traits that are shared. Now, the driver energy wants to build spreadsheets, value individualized work, okay? And the blue part, the Guardian contribution, contain emotions, display discipline, question people, etc. Maybe those are just coincidentally there, but they're saying they share all of these things. They all like to build spreadsheets. They all value individual work, or both of these. They hold their emotions, they display good discipline, and they question people and ideas. All right, so far so good. You guys getting the vibe where Guardian might be living?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So now we come over here to Integrator. Integrator, they also subdivide a little bit. So looks like integrators overall are diplomatic and empathic. But they divide them into teamers and dreamers. And so the dreamers, we come over here to that more teal kind of color, intrinsically motivated, non-confrontational, and then more on the clockwise direction up here into the strange greens, traditional relationship oriented. And then you get up to the pioneer. They don't subdivide the pioneer: outgoing, detail averse, spontaneous, risk-seeking, adaptable, and imaginative. Okay, and then the other shared things. They like to build relationships, prefer teamwork, express emotions, display flexibility, trust people and ideas. Are you guys getting kind of a vibe for where that might land on the change grid? Yeah.
I'm having difficulty. I know English is actually my third language, but I'm having difficulty grasping integrator. Like,
Yeah.
is that
I think the integrator, the way that,
is
and again,
described there? I don't get it.
yeah, let me just scroll backwards here and see if they give us any kind of an actual definition that they could for that. But if not, they don't in the document that we've been linked to. But let me just say that I think they're talking about integrating both people and ideas.
Okay, so that's like an influencer or something like
No, that's
that?
what we're going to find out. That's what we're going to find out, because
Okay.
when I read this, I'm thinking this feels more supportive to me than driver, which sounds more outgoing. You know, this feels a little more internally focused. This feels a little bit more externally focused.
So like an amiable is integrator.
That's what
Yes.
I'm thinking, but we're going to see if
Okay.
we agree with how this is going to overlay. So let's just bring the circle all the way around. We have a pioneer and a driver sharing these kinds of things. These two types embrace risk, decide quickly, brush off mistakes, call the shots, and try things out. All right. Now, if we want to overlay that on the change grid, does anybody want to tell me anything you feel certain is going to hold true? If such a possibility even exists. Anything. What I've done is I've kind of, oh, I'm sorry, I zoomed in on the wrong one. Let me just go to this one, forget these words over here. But do you guys have any idea about where you think something might land?
I
So,
think Kathy kind of alluded to it, like with the driver aspect. But I was trying to picture like what Kathy was talking about, like slightly to the right,
yes.
so
Yeah,
that the driver's out grid, like
yeah, the
going in that
driver's out
direction.
grid. But the
Yeah.
scientist element, where would you put that? Kathy, go right ahead.
Yeah, the Pioneer is much more, I think, up grid in the oh, what's the social style terminology? Uh, da 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 da.
The expressive?
Expressive. Yeah, thank you. The expressive side of it. So it's more like the expressive driver. And so I see, again, I see it rotating to the right still,
Yep.
and because the Guardian is going to go further to the down grid,
Hmm.
Yep.
to the analytics side. Um, and I don't know if integrator is more in grid, but it tends to be more of that focus on amiable, bringing people together, looking at connecting things.
Yeah.
And so, it could be that this whole thing shifts over to the right half of the grid, for all we know,
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
and kind of eliminates, the in-grid component of it, but it definitely shifts right almost 45 degrees, I think, rotates right, not quite, but almost 45 degrees is my feeling.
45 degrees from driver, rotate at 45 degrees this way. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if it's actually 45, it might be less, but it shifts, it's going to shift.
Sure. And do you guys think this, do you think it overlays on the entire change grid or on a subset of the change grid territory?
I like what Kathy was just alluding to, that subset, because I'm thinking like that word that I still struggle with, the integrator. You have to have a sense of awareness to do some of those things that are
Yep.
described there, right?
Yep. Right. And so, all right, if we're going to say, well, we believe that this is something that's going to represent a subset of the full territory of the change grid, what would you say, even in their description, when they say these are work styles, where do you think it's going to overlay? Do you think it goes all the way up grid, all the way down grid? Do you think it's confined to a particular spot?
No, I think it goes over to the right, maybe up to the green circle.
All righty then. Okay, let me throw up what where my head went with it. When they said that it's about work styles, I believe that all work styles have what as a primary energy?
Driver.
Driver.
Driver. Now, I thought, well, the way they're describing these four, it can't overlay on our quadrants. So the other thing that I can do to subdivide the outgrid quadrant into four sections is to draw a vertical line and a horizontal line. And so if I draw the vertical line and the horizontal line, now I'm talking about these four wedges, four triangles, whatever we want to call these things. Let's see if we can get the four main types to overlay based on this little diagram. And I'm going to have to shrink it all back because now I can't get to my little pictures. But let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger than that so we can play a little bit. All right, are you guys feeling that there's possibilities here?
Yes.
Yeah. Now that would mean driver, to Kathy's point, has to be a little bit more downgrade because they're saying there's analytical elements to that driver. If that is the case, that would make the guardian this wedge. That would make the pioneer this wedge, and the integrator this wedge. So let's go back to the descriptions that diagram provided. I'm going to open it up again so we can kind of look at it without going back to that slide. I don't like flipping slides if I don't have to. I'd much rather, oh, wait, something miraculous just happened. I'd much rather drag this in for a minute. So let's just look at what it's saying for the driver. Quantitative and logical. Right there, do you guys agree that had to shift to the analytical direction?
Yes.
And then they said, well, no, there's a commander expression of it, which is focused and competitive, and a scientist element, which is experimental and deeply curious. So what if I said, all right, since they've decided to subdivide it, let's put the commander a little bit upgrid of this center point of this wedge. And let's put the scientist a little bit in the downgrid section of this wedge. That would mean that the commander is more of an analytical driven driver, and that the scientist is more of a analytical driver. All right. Does that resonate with anybody, or am I just making stuff up as I go along?
No, that sounds right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree.
Now let's pull Pioneer in here for just a second and see if Pioneer fits up here. So Pioneer would need to be the northern half of the driven driver, so an expressive driven driver, and a big old chunk, half, in fact, the driver's side of the expressive driver area. So let's see if that resonates with what they're saying a Pioneer is. A Pioneer is outgoing, detail averse. I just would say they're not detail oriented. I don't think they hate details, but nevertheless, they don't get bogged down by them. Spontaneous, risk-seeking, adaptable, and imaginative. Oops, what did I just do? Oh, I see what I did. How many of you would agree that that does, in fact, kind of resonate with this area? Yes? No?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I could live with it even moving up grid just a touch as well.
Just a touch more. So rather than having it here, why don't we put it in kind of like the epicenter of right there?
Yeah.
That might feel right, in which case, but for sake of balance, I'll move integrator up there. So now let's look at the integrator. The integrator also had two parts to it, but the integrator overall was described as diplomatic and empathetic. Diplomatic and empathetic. I will tell you that diplomacy is most definitely an expressive, amiable driver kind of thing. The diplomacy is their normal way of operating. And what was the other thing they said? Diplomatic and well, they're saying empathic. So I don't really know that to me, okay. If they're saying that empathic and empathetic are the same things, fine. But when I think of someone who's being an empath, someone who is empathic, I'm describing someone who has an amazing ability to sense other people's emotions, as opposed to being empathetic, which is, I think, supporting them in their emotions, etc. So you get, I almost think that being empathic is a sixth sense of sorts.
Exactly.
More of an intuitive kind of thing, but they're not using the word empathetic anywhere. So using their lingo.
But people always misuse those words.
Yeah. And so, I would say empathetic makes more sense. But we'll get back to that in just a second. Nevertheless, I do believe that to be empathic requires you to have a well-exercised emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough to say. And from our talks we did about emotional intelligence before, we said emotional intelligence tends to be these four quadrants. So two of them in the expressive and two of them in the driver. This is where we found all that resilience kind of stuff going on, all those things that they attribute to emotional intelligence. It ends up being here.
And to be empathic, that would make sense then, because the cornerstone of emotional intelligence is self-awareness.
Right, exactly right. And so if I go back to that diagram for just a second, what were their two little subs? They said there are teamers and dreamers. And the teamer is traditional and relationship oriented. And the dreamer is intrinsically motivated and non-confrontational.
Mm.
Now they are suggesting that the teamer is in this green area. The teamer is towards the pioneer, as far as the color spectrum is concerned, and that the dreamer is towards the guardian, so more counterclockwise. So let's see if we put those words where they've just indicated, if we're okay with that. So, okay, someday I'll actually learn how PowerPoint works. But it would seem to me that they said the dreamer is towards the guardian and the teamer is towards the pioneer.
Or the amiable and the dreamer, that I'm thinking that close to the PowerPoint, that non-detachment resonates with what they were talking about.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, teamer is definitely feels more involved,
Mm-hmm.
and dreamer feels more detached. If they're saying that a dreamer, one moment, I know I'm flipping things around, but bear with me, that the teamer is more traditional relationship oriented, that feels a little bit more between the green and the red circle where life is lived, where things have to be done, as opposed to inside the green circle. And when I look at the dreamer is intrinsically motivated and non-confrontational.
Mm-hmm.
That's very inside the green circle energetically. All right, so the only one left to look at is this guardian type. Again, they describe the guardian as methodical, reserved, detail-oriented, practical, structured, and loyal. So the moment I heard loyal, I heard an amiable element coming into play, an appreciation for people that are involved in the whole thing. So that resonates, all those things that were more analytical to begin with. So if you think of the guardian, as far as our little horizontal and vertical line, the guardian would be the lower half of an amiable driver and the amiable half of the analytical driver. So we're still hearing a lot of analytical energy, but we're also hearing more amiable kind of energy. And what's a guardian doing anyway? Isn't a guardian protecting? So maybe it's protecting people. Maybe the guardian energy is protecting what has been built and established, out there safeguarding what the company is and what the company is doing. And so I have to say that to Kathy's original observation, this needs to be rotated. And we would rotate it in such a way that if you think about it, these shared traits of the pioneer and the driver would actually be right here on this line, on this blue line. And so that would say this is where people along this blue line, which don't forget could also be the heart line, is where people are embracing risk, deciding quickly. They would tend to brush off mistakes. I take issue with brushing off mistakes. I don't believe they just discard them summarily. I would like to think that they're being a little bit more learning from it. So rather than brushing them off, I would hope that they're learning from their mistakes, maybe learning quickly, maybe setting things aside temporarily for a deeper dive later. But I do take issue with the verb to brush off something. Do you guys agree with that or disagree with that?
Yes, that would make
Yes.
sense in a work context, to just
Yeah.
brush anything off.
Yeah, and that I just think is a little not right. Calling the shots, yes,
Mm-hmm.
for sure. And trying it out, yeah, as long as we're on the Ingrid side of things. I don't know that, well, trying it out if you're in the outgrid danger zone, right along this line, a lot of this is outgrid danger zone. If you're in the outgrid danger zone, your idea of trying it out doesn't sound like it's going to be a fun little game for everyone to play with. I think trying it out means I told you to do it. Let's try it. Let's do it. It feels like it could be a very directive try it out as opposed to a very participative or fun try it out, if you will. Yeah. Thoughts about that? Yeah.
So is this therefore like saying that people, are they looking at roles that these, or that you have a natural tendency for one of these?
I would predict, and again, this is why I'd love to see what the report actually looks like. But I'm going to believe that when you take whatever their test is, it's going to say that you have a certain percentage of driver and a certain percentage. So usually inside of a circumplex diagram, you find a funny kind of deformed square. And so things get stretched in a certain way so they can show what your percentage makeup is of each of these four elements. I would also imagine, depending on how long their training is, that they are saying that each person has one of these as their primary. And just focusing on primaries for a short program, maybe this could be a way that we help people better understand one another and communicate with one another, work together, et cetera, et cetera. So because it's about work styles, I'm going to believe they're not going to say that anybody is 100% driver. Now, going back to DISC for just a second, I would hope that they don't think that DISC is coming along and saying that you're a 100% D, I, S, or C. I'm sure it could also saying like, no, you've got contributing factors and you might be predominantly this. So I don't know why they're choosing this other than, or your specific client, Chris, is favoring this. But if it's more that they're concerned about how people are working together instead of about how people are getting along generally, I can see where this model might have some benefit to it.
Yeah, I think other than a good salesperson, more aligned with what Brian was saying, because DISC focuses a lot about behaviors, and I think they're leaning more towards roles.
Yeah.
Empowering and supporting more of a role mindset and not just a behavior mindset.
Yep. And so so far I'm okay. I would say that this does overlay on the change grid as long as we confine it to the outgrid quadrant. Now maybe it spills over a little bit. We're not trying to be precise as we do these overlays. But I just want to do this for a second. I want to pull this into play. Is that even readable if I do that? I suppose I could shrink it, but I can do some screenshots to say that when we look at precise locations for these lines, let me go upgrid for just a second. What this vertical line is at the bottom would share the traits of the guardian and their idea of a driver. And I would want to reverse these for the sake of the graphic, but it's not important. It doesn't change anything we're talking about. No, it's actually a balanced blend for it to be where it is. In which case, would I say that an analytical driver energy, that's where they're putting this, an analytical driver energy likes to build spreadsheets. Oh, okay, fine. I'll say that might be something they like doing. Value individual work. I would say both a guardian and an analytical, or both these energies, both sides of this, like individual work. Containing emotions, that would resonate. Display discipline, yep. And question people and ideas. I would say all those do resonate with what we're looking at right there. Agree, disagree, concerns, thoughts? Nay?
Yeah, that sounds right.
All right, well, let me.
Sounds accurate.
Good, let me squiggle this one over here because now it's no longer, oh, look, something just happened. All right then, let's scoot this over to here. No, stop it. Oh, we'll get the idea. So that's what's happening on that line. If I come around now to the PI shared traits. picture, screenshot, or a little area shot, drag it over here. Where did it go? It didn't come. These shared traits, I should just stop trying to talk when I'm trying to do something like this because I'm no good at it. All right, shared traits. Let's move this over here to this blue line. So again, oh, sorry. It's still along that blue horizontal line. And so out here, the integrator and the guardian share. No, that's pioneer and integrator. Pioneer integrator. Sorry, this one goes up. Up. These are both relationship builders. Now, I would say to you that someone who is an expressive driver is most definitely achieving their driver desired outcomes by getting people energized around situations. So I can certainly say that building relationships is part of it. They do like working with the team, so a driven, expressive. So that's the other little part of this. Wait, where am I slicing? This little part right here. It's still inside of that expressive driver quadrant, but on the amiable side of things, that would be true. Express emotions, display flexibility. Again, here is where resilience lives on the change grid, and they trust people and ideas. Remember, this is where brainstorming exists. This is where thoughtful problem solving actually occurs. So the expressive driver energy on the amiable side and the expressive amiable driver energy here, put those together and you've got that integrator pioneer kind of blend. Yeah. Okay. I'm all right with that. And that leaves us this last little one. And that is not PI, not that one. Go down to the bottom. And that is the IG. Let me do a little near. That's the sound of something being copied, by the way. In case you were wondering. Okay, but we got to scooch you up. It's got to scooch you over here. So that would say that on this side of things, half I, half G, they tolerate risk. That's fine. That's an attribute of being outgrid to begin with. They like making deliberate decisions. If deliberate means thoughtful and considerate, that happens along the heart line. That's most definitely a driven, or rather an amiable driver kind of a task. So I'm okay with all that. Internalized mistakes. I don't know about that. If that's true, that's true. I would say that someone who's more of a guardian, because they have that analytical driver element, are probably looking for external causes for those mistakes as opposed to feeling like they made the mistake. They are about making things happen. These are worker bees for sure. This integrator, that a lot of work gets done right here. These two pieces. And they trust the tried and true. I would have no argument with that. They like to build on what they already know to be good and whatever. All right, and so without dragging this out any further, I'm certainly comfortable saying that this model does in fact overlay on the change grid as long as we confine it to the general outgrid area and we do the rotation we've just done.
But these are great descriptors, but I think, or could we say that the value of bringing tension management into this, because again, they're abandoning another descriptor in terms of disk, right? So it seems like perhaps maybe they want more of what a lot of organizations are wanting, which is the implementation of these descriptors, right? Yeah. So this implementation science, like what do we do with this? How do we understand not just the role and task, how do we integrate it so that we can help people understand how to optimize functioning and those kinds of things? So that seems to be what's missing.
I agree with that. And again, Chris, going back to giving any kind of guidance to your client, you have to start by asking them what their desired outcome is. What's really driving this thought process around making that change? What is DISC not giving them? that they're looking for something else to give, because I don't disagree that depending on their situation, they might want to look at another instrument, but let's not just jump on this one because it's pretty. So there's got to be some reason behind choosing it. We had someone who would participate in our calls quite often. You guys know Ellen. Ellen has her PhD in this kind of psychographic kind of work. And so she had something like 200 different tools that she could recommend to clients. So she'd go in there and help a client choose the right tool for whatever they're trying to do, the right instrument. So I don't know that this is the right one. So I got to begin there. What is their desired outcome? In fact, when in doubt, walk the path. So where are they at? Where are they trying to go? What's in their way? And work it from there. Some general things, issues that yeah, go right ahead.
It's like in the military, we would say that some people do ready, fire, aim.
Right. And
so
I think that's what you want to talk for. I would also say that I have two generalized, not so much problems with the model, but areas where I see some gap that they may benefit from fleshing out. And that is, why do integrator and driver get these two little subs as they work their way around the color spectrum, but Pioneer and Guardian didn't? So can we not find a word that describes a what I call that, an integrator leaning Guardian versus a driver leaning Guardian? How come I can't have two words for those? How come I can't have two words for up here on Pioneer? So my head's all about integrating things, and whenever I see gaps like that form, I don't know why, but I feel compelled to fill out the gaps, flesh out the gap. So that might just be me. We all have our madness expressed in our own different kinds of ways. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that I would hate to think that they're just going to teach this model like it's all a feel good, let's make everything happen and happen really well, and not recognize that part of that pioneer energy and part of that driver energy can be in a danger zone. And part of that dreamer energy, that integrator energy, and part of that guardian energy could be too far mid-grid for people to actually be involved. This gets back to what you guys were saying about the engagement rings. Keep in mind that a nice chunk, I'm going to scoot this out of the way for just a second, that a nice chunk of this whole integrator guardian merge is all about formulating intentions, but not really getting into the work, right? This band of the engagement rings is all about formulating intentions. And I'm not saying that's bad. You got to formulate some intentions before you get things moving. But if they're thinking that these integrator and guardian energies are the ones that are actually doing the work, I know it says make it happen, but I'm going to say it's only making it happen if you get closer, if you get into that engagement section of it, where the others are all fully engaged, maybe even too engaged out here, killing things in execution. But nevertheless, I just would say I hope that when they give their explanations about your personality type, that they do mention that integrator guardian blend can be a little bit too, I want to say, too tentative isn't the right word, but they're still holding back. They're still in that intention sort of thing. They're still formulating what needs to be done, as opposed to actually now going and doing it. Sooner or later, they got to do it. The other thing that, and again, the danger zone is the danger zone. But the other thing that I think they may ignore altogether, I really don't know, but we have 3/4 of the change grid that aren't even being mentioned. What's the likelihood that they've got people inside of their company that aren't living in any of these 4 subquadrants, but are in fact living in one of these other larger areas of the change grid? So I guess what I'm saying there is that the thought that the people that walk through your door at a place of business every day are coming to you in the outgrid quadrant, ready to be the guardian, the commander, the scientist, the driver, the pioneer, the teamer. Well, I think a lot of this is very wishful thinking, or is a wonderful goal to strive for. But I think that who's coming to your workplace includes people that are just upgrid and just downgrid and maybe just plain ingrid. And so they're not getting a full picture of the range of human expression.
That could be a training that they go through to really dive into this, because as I think about living systems, that and some of the traits they all have in common, I would
Yeah.
consider an organization a living system. They have dynamic relationships in common. And
Right.
that's why they can self-organize. But we don't think about that when it comes to corporation in terms of self-organizing. Most are built on hierarchies.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
if you can teach those for uh, 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 labels how to interact together, and perhaps you can have a workable team, and that's very specific to different kinds of functionalities and different kinds of organizational goals. I can see the change. Read Tension management certainly helping them in that aspect,
I
because
would agree.
they'll know who's ready and who isn't, who's on
That's right.
board, who isn't.
That's right. That's right. And in fact, Chris, I think to kind of open up that thought, I would say to them that we have a label for this DG shared traits. We call this the analytical. And when it comes to these PD shared traits, we call this the driver. That's our idea of what a driver really would be. And we call these shared traits to be the expressive, if they're in that blend. And over here, it's the amiable. And maybe then you could say, but these types extend far beyond what this model is, at least at surface glance, in all fairness to it. We've only looked at one diagram. And
Right.
so we're trying to deduce a lot from this. Yep.
Yeah, I'm gonna do the process. I'm gonna take, I think it's, I'm not sure what's the investment, but I'm gonna go through those to that reference material in that link. I'm gonna go through all of that just to get up to speed
Yeah,
on
yeah,
it as
yeah.
well.
And see if you can get what a report actually looks like, a sample report. And if you
Absolutely.
share that with us, we can get a lot more meaningful information around it. And the other thing is that to get the conversation absolutely started, I would walk the path with them and just say, I'm hearing that you want to do something. Can we just rewind for a moment and tell me where you're at and where you're trying to go? What you hope
Absolutely.
to gain, not gain, lose, not lose, before you embark upon whatever this investment happens to be. At the same time, if they said, look, we're just trying to put together a one-day program to do at a retreat, well, then more power to you. I think it'd be interesting to hear a one-day program on this model. So,
Yeah. I hate to hear words like abandoning this just because it's outdated or something.
and just let them know, make
It's
sure you
crazy.
always frame yourself that you are not an abandoner. You are not debating ever which is right, which is wrong, which is good, which is bad. You are an integrator. And
Yeah.
so, that's what we do. We're the merging of brilliance. And so, yes, we may choose one model over another depending on what the client's outcome happens to be, but we are still always governed by the degree to which things can be integrated. So we never cast any wisdom aside. We simply see where it fits and we honor it and respect it and try to add to it and in appreciation for what it has added to us. Yeah. And by the way, I don't really know that we've learned anything different that we didn't kind of already know about these four, but nevertheless, I appreciate the exercise of getting it to overlay. Right? I mean, did we learn anything brand spanking new as we did this? Or is this just kind of further confirming what it is you guys already knew about the outgrid quadrant and the
Yep.
energies that are out there?
In fact, I think
Absolutely.
it further underscored the value that tension management brings to the table. Because for me, there's so many trends, and you get organizations get on the latest fad. You see this now with different labels like chief joy officer, chief,
Yeah,
this kind of officer, and they have their own tools that they use. That's a fad. It doesn't necessarily mean
exactly.
that
It
people
will
are
not
experiencing
endure.
joy in
It
your
will not endure.
organization.
No,
Right.
no. Remember that there are lots and lots of things in the world of human growth and development, lots of things in the world of coaching and consulting and training and all that have a heyday and have an amazing heyday. Can you imagine how much money was made off of chicken soup for the whatever?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
That was there. And for a long time, weren't we tossing fish back and forth for one another? And that it had a heyday and good for it. But we would like to think that because we did integrate those things into the change grid, that the key principles that they were advocating have been integrated. They have been captured in what we think of as being the merging of brilliance.
I like that direction Brian was going into, not just models being a fad, but language, right? The more language is adjusted in the meaning of certain words, it takes away a lot of the true essence and meanings of things. And I think it distorts what the reality of the situation is.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, do you guys know what they call laying people off in the UK?
No, what?
They use the word redundancy.
Wow.
You are redundant, and so we are setting you aside for now. So they'll use that to eliminate positions, redundancy, or whatever. So, we talk about laying people off and letting people go. No, their people become redundant. And so it's like, all right, that's a very different word. But if that's the word you use, then if I'm going to work there, that's what I need to know. That's
Wow.
Redundancy. Okay, so we're at the top of the hour. I think we've given this model lots, although again, Chris, get your hands on that report. I'd love
I will.
to share
I
it.
will.
And I got to believe if they want you to be buying into this model, it's perfectly legit for you to say, or for your client to say, we need to see a sample report. So we know, what are we really getting out of this? And then how is it used or whatever. So I think it's a perfectly legitimate ask for someone who's considering making a change or adding the tool at the very least.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now, one thing I'd like to do for all of you that are here right now, and I'll probably also email it out to everyone, is I want to give you something that Tim sent over. And this has to do with the diversity awareness profile. So I've texted over to everybody. And what I'd like you to do, hopefully Tim can join us on Thursday, in which case, if he does, I'd like all of you guys to have had the opportunity to fill out the little questionnaire. It's in the middle of that little PDF I just sent you. So trying to figure out a little bit about how you are when it comes to your level of awareness about diversity. So you can read what's in there. I think it's really interesting, but he was curious to know about whether or not this overlays on the change grid. I'm going to save you guys a whole lot of trouble right away to say that this little whatever galaxy you're looking at here of words, this does not overlay. These words are in no particular orientation other than the fact that they're trying to say primary, secondary, and organizational, but don't think that their order going around the circle has any meaning at all. It's just the way they chose to depict them. So don't try to make that overlay. But when you get done with your results, it's going to put you on this fan. And they call this the diversity awareness spectrum based on your score, where you end up. And so if this is going to overlay, it's going to overlay not as a fan. Well, I don't know, maybe it'll overlay as a fan, but I think it's going to overlay as a continuum. There's going to be one horizontal line. And on that line, we're going to see where you might fall. And based on these little Kodak moments along that line, the generation today probably doesn't even know what a Kodak moment is. Interesting, but stopping along for the photo opportunity, I think it's going to overlay on a straight line, but how that straight line lays on the change grid is what's going to be interesting to look at. So again, I've chatted it over to all of you. Go ahead, download that, or drag it to your desktop. Go ahead and fill it all out so you can see where you fall on the spectrum, and then we'll see how this plays out when Tim can join us. All right. Yep.
Real quick. Interestingly enough, to your last comment, I was reading a research study that talked about how most kids can't tell time by just looking at a clock.
Right. They can't do analog time.
Right.
I was listening to a comedian and she was saying that, how the new generations think they're going to take over the world. And her joke was that, well, all we have to do to make sure they don't know what's going on with us is to always use a regular clock and write in cursive. And write on paper. As long as it's on paper and in cursive, they're
Wow.
they're hopeless.
And speaking cliches.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. That part.
Yeah, is that in this awareness kind of thing? Did I just do something that was there you go. Yeah. But
Why
so it all plays out because they do say somewhere on this, if I remember going around it, there was something about your generation or something like that. Maybe it was in something like
Making generalizations, maybe.
well, but we bring our history with us no matter where we go.
Right.
And our history at all of our ages is very different than those that are half our ages or, or just in college now or whatever. We have a very different thing. So part of that does come from what generation we were part of, what from that generation. So I don't know where that fits on here, but I would like to think that there are generational patterns that probably affect our viewpoint on diversity and our ability to flex into the diversity requirements of today.
Hey,
All
T,
the
could you
more
go to
reason why awareness is
That's it, and that's what they're talking
necessary.
about.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, T, could you go to the questions real quick for a moment?
Yeah,
What would be interesting, even if we just took question number 1,
Yeah.
is put that on a change grid and see how people plot and then see how this responds to it.
Right, because it's great that people say, well, I almost never do that or I always do that. But what if we then say, how do you rate your ability to do this and the challenge of doing it?
Right.
Lo and behold, we find out they're down in apathy.
Right.
Yeah,
So
that's
what's
brilliant.
going on? What's going on?
Yeah.
Particularly when they say one of the places along their spectrum you could end up is as a fighter. And and it's interesting because when you read the deeper description, it says that fighters are always on the lookout for prejudice and see it everywhere. So, they see discrimination where there was nothing deliberate going on. It was just an innocent sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, I get it.
You, Karen.
This is part of being unaware. Yeah, now Shag, you just brought something up. I want to know, where does intentionality come in to these sorts of things, where it says like a perpetuator is aware of the biases and prejudices, but continue the negative behaviors and reinforces stereotypes. Is it because they're downgraded and don't care to change? Or is it because they're fighting their own little battle and want to stir up trouble?
Or is it that they're manipulated by media or whatever the situation is?
This is it. And so I think that we can do a lot more with this model than at least in these few little pages, because this is just an excerpt.
And how do you tie frequency to come up with where someone ends up? Just because the frequency of a particular activity can determine if you're a fighter?
Right. And by the way, does it bother anyone else that I can't have never and I can't have always?
Yeah.
It's basically just assuming that we are all going to be doing things that are, off the target. Maybe I've achieved great enlightenment and I'm always doing certain things. And maybe I've achieved great enlightenment and I never do certain things or whatever. I really guess.
Yeah, that's uncomfortable. And I think that's why having conversations around culture and race is so tough. You can't, constrain it in that way, get, honesty behind these perceptions and perspectives.
Yeah.
You just can't reduce it to that.
Yep. But obviously this model has been around since 2007. I think Wiley published it. I don't think Wiley does much in terms of delivering programming, but maybe they did. I have no idea. But already we're looking at something that's, well, what is that? 7, 8, 9 years old. Yeah.
Interesting.
Is that right? Did I just do my math right? No, it's 6 years. No. Yeah. No. Sorry, it's 16 years old. So anyway, there you go. All right. Good talking to everybody. We will pick up where we left off, and I'll see what I can do to make sure Tim's on the call so we can explore this model as well.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Cheers.